A bombshell political scandal is unfolding in the UK that has Prime Minister Keir Starmer on the defensive and scrambling to control the narrative as questions mount about what really happened.
He said in that speech, summing up China as a threat in one word would be, his words, impossible, impractical, and most importantly, unwise. Foreign Secretary, Mr. Speaker, it wasn't just him. Mr. Speaker, the leader of the opposition was business secretary at the time. In September 23, the leader of the opposition said, her words, September 23, the relevant year, her words, we should certainly not be describing China as a foe. It's worth looking up the word foe in the dictionary, Mr. Speaker. She went, Mr. Speaker, it doesn't end there, Mr. Speaker. In September 2024, the leader of the opposition said this, I quote, I have shied away from calling China a threat. She is playing politics with national security.
The collapse of a major Chinese espionage case has sparked weeks of intense criticism and accusations of a government cover-up, forcing Starmer into a dramatic public commitment to release classified evidence. This isn't just another political spat, it's a story that goes to the very heart of Britain's national security and raises serious questions about whether the Labour government prioritized trade relations with China over prosecuting alleged spies. The case involves two British men, Christopher Cash and Christopher Barry, who were accused of passing sensitive information to Chinese intelligence agents. Cash, a former parliamentary researcher with close ties to Conservative MPs, and Barry, a teacher, both denied the charges against them. But in an unexpected move last month, Britain's Crown Prosecution Service dropped all charges, citing a lack of evidence to prove that China posed a threat to UK national security. The CPS claimed they had been trying for months to get additional evidence from the government that would clearly establish China as a national security threat. But this evidence never materialized. This is where the story takes a dramatic turn. The prosecution's collapse immediately triggered a bitter blame game between the government and the opposition. Starmer initially tried to pin the blame on the previous Conservative administration, arguing that their characterization of China as merely an epoch-defining challenge rather than a direct threat was what doomed the case. But Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch wasn't having any of it. She fired back with devastating accusations that Starmer's government was too weak to stand up to China on crucial matters of national security.
The final statement in this case was submitted in August 2025. There was no further submission of evidence, one way or the other, after any discussion in September. This is a red herring, a completely scurrilous allegation made by the Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has now twice directly contradicted the words of his Security Minister. They cannot both be right. The chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee couldn't get any answers from the Security Minister. The CPS said that they were satisfied that the decision to charge the case in April 2024, not August, in April 2024, was correct on the basis of where the law stood at that time. This is a matter of fact. It is not a matter of what the previous government had thought. It is not a matter of it not meeting a legal test. It did. Something must have changed when the charges were brought and when the case collapsed. The charges were brought under us. The case collapsed under them. Can the Prime Minister tell us what changed and what collapsed the case?
Mr. Speaker, I've said I will publish the witness statements in full. The whole House will then see exactly what was set out in 2023 in the substantive witness statement and exactly what was set out in the two supplementary witness statements, and she will then realise what she's just said is entirely baseless.
The political temperature reached boiling point during Prime Minister's questions on Wednesday, where Badenoch relentlessly pressed Starmer on the government's handling of the case. The opposition leader accused Labour of deliberately allowing the case to collapse because they didn't want to jeopardize Britain's lucrative trade relationships with China. These weren't just political theatrics, they were serious allegations that strike at the core of government competence and integrity. Under mounting pressure and facing accusations of a cover-up, Starmer made a dramatic announcement during the parliamentary session. He promised to publish in full the witness statements provided to the Crown Prosecution Service by Britain's Deputy National Security Advisor, Matthew Collins. This was an extraordinary move that underscored just how politically toxic this scandal had become for the Labour government. True to his word, the government released Collins' witness statements late Wednesday night. But rather than clearing the air, these documents have only deepened the controversy and raised even more troubling questions. The statements reveal a fascinating and concerning pattern. Collins provided 3 separate witness statements to the CPS over the course of the case. The first statement, submitted in December 2023 under the previous Conservative government, was unequivocal in describing China as a threat to British national security. It went into detailed allegations against Cash and Barry and painted a clear picture of Chinese espionage activities targeting the UK. However, the 2 subsequent statements, both provided this year under Starmer's Labour government, tell a very different story. The language about China was notably softer and more diplomatic. Most remarkably, Collins's final statement concluded with language taken directly from Labour's manifesto, describing the government's desire to cooperate with China where we can, compete when we need to, and challenge where we must. This dramatic shift in tone raises serious questions about political interference in what should have been an independent legal process. Why did Collins soften his language in the more recent statements? Was this change in approach influenced by the new Labour government's desire to maintain positive relations with China? The timing is particularly suspicious given that Labour came to power in July with a stated policy of improving trade and diplomatic relations with Beijing. The published statements also reveal the government's 3 C's approach to China: cooperation, competition, and challenge. While this might sound like a balanced diplomatic strategy, critics argue it demonstrates Labour's reluctance to take a firm stance against Chinese espionage activities. The fact that manifesto language appeared in an official witness statement meant for criminal proceedings suggests an inappropriate blending of political policy and legal evidence. Conservative MPs have seized on these revelations as proof of their allegations. They argue that the softened language in the later statements was deliberately designed to undermine the prosecution's case, effectively sabotaging the trial to avoid diplomatic embarrassment with China. This interpretation paints a picture of a government willing to sacrifice national security prosecutions for economic and political considerations. The Crown Prosecution Service's position throughout this saga has been consistent but concerning. They maintained that they needed clear evidence that China represented a threat to national security at the time the alleged offenses occurred. Despite months of requests for additional evidence, they claim the government never provided the necessary documentation to meet this legal threshold. This raises fundamental questions about whether the government was genuinely unable to provide such evidence or whether they were unwilling to do so. The implications of this case extend far beyond the immediate political fallout. If the opposition's allegations are true, it would mean that a major espionage prosecution was deliberately undermined for political reasons. This would represent a serious breach of the principle that national security should be above party politics and economic considerations. It would also send a concerning signal to allies and adversaries about Britain's commitment to countering foreign espionage activities. The case has also highlighted broader concerns about Labour's approach to China. Since coming to power, the party has been criticized for being too accommodating toward Beijing, with critics arguing that economic interests are taking precedence over security concerns. The collapse of this espionage case fits into this narrative and provides ammunition for those who believe Labour is not taking the Chinese threat seriously enough. The political damage to Starmer personally has been significant. As a former director of public prosecutions, he should understand better than most the importance of keeping politics out of criminal proceedings. The fact that his government appears to have influenced witness statements in a way that undermined a major national security prosecution is particularly damaging to his reputation for integrity and competence. The timing of this scandal couldn't be worse for Labour. Just months into their tenure, they're facing serious questions about their judgment on national security matters. The opposition has been relentless in their attacks, and the drip feed of revelations has kept the story in the headlines for weeks. This is exactly the kind of sustained negative coverage that can seriously damage a government's credibility and public standing. What makes this scandal particularly potent is that it combines several politically toxic elements. There are allegations of cover-ups, questions about national security competence, suggestions of foreign influence, and evidence of political interference in legal proceedings. It's a perfect storm of negative stories that opposition parties dream of and governing parties fear. The international implications are also significant. Britain's allies, particularly in the intelligence community, will be watching this case closely. If it appears that the UK government is willing to compromise espionage prosecutions for diplomatic reasons, it could damage intelligence sharing relationships and undermine Britain's reputation as a reliable security partner. The case also highlights the broader challenge Western democracies face in dealing with authoritarian regimes like China. How do you balance legitimate economic and diplomatic interests with the need to counter espionage and security threats? This case suggests that Labour may have tilted too far toward accommodation at the expense of security. Looking forward, this scandal is far from over. Conservative MPs are demanding the release of additional documents, including correspondence between government officials and prosecutors. They want to know exactly who was involved, vetted in the decision-making process, and whether ministers were aware of or influenced the changes to the witness statements. There are also questions about the role of other senior officials, including National Security Advisor Jonathan Powell, who was reportedly involved in discussions about the case.
Well, it is extraordinary. Parliament returns today, and I suspect that there will be a debate this afternoon about this shocking Chinese spying scandal and what is clear interference from elements of the government and its advisors to stop this case. And I fear that when I asked a question of the security minister some 3 weeks ago in the House, I think he inadvertently misled Parliament when he said there's been no interference. All the information now confirms that there has been. It all seems to revolve around the National Security Advisor, Jonathan Powell. This is the same bloke, by the way, who was instrumental in negotiating to give away at vast expense one of our most valuable strategic assets, our own freehold, called the Chagos Islands.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to wonder whose side this bloke's on.
Yeah. Well, do you know, I was reading a piece as I was coming into work this morning in, I think it's the Telegraph, a shadowy cabal of people running this country, of whom Jonathan Powell is one. But guess what? They say Keir Starmer isn't one of them. So Keir Starmer's not even in charge of the country anymore.
I don't think he's been in charge for some time. I mean, he's just a sort of puppet at the top, and his strings are being pulled. I mean, but it's really, really serious.
Yeah.
And you have got this spying scandal. China's basically been given a green light to spy sort of willy-nilly in the UK because this government won't declare them as a national security threat. And we've got to stop this. And as for this super embassy, I mean, it's just an appalling concept. Right in the heart of the City of London, enormous embassy where the plans, they redact, they delete what goes on in some of the rooms, in the dungeons, in the basement levels. Well, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to work out what might be going on in those rooms that they don't want anybody to know about.
No, exactly right. And as somebody pointed out over the weekend, you know, it's strategically placed between Canary Wharf and the City of London, the two kind of financial hubs of the country. And all manner of stuff could be, you know, intercepted, if you like, simply by, hacking into the sort of cables and all sorts of other things.
The opposition is particularly interested in whether Treasury officials intervened to block the prosecution to preserve trade relations with China. As some media reports have suggested, the two men at the center of this case, Cash and Barry, have maintained their innocence throughout. Cash has expressed relief that the charges were dropped, but has also highlighted the personal toll of being caught up in such a high-profile case. Barry's legal team has expressed frustration at the lack of expiation, a nation for the case's collapse, adding another layer of complexity to an already convoluted situation. The broader question this case raises is about the rule of law in Britain. If governments can influence criminal proceedings for political reasons, it undermines the fundamental principle that justice should be blind to political considerations. This is particularly concerning when it involves national security cases where the stakes are highest. The scandal has also exposed tensions between different parts of the British establishment. The Crown Prosecution Service has effectively accused the government of failing to provide necessary evidence, while the government has tried to blame both the previous administration and civil servants. This public washing of dirty laundry is embarrassing, for all involved, and damages Britain's international reputation. As this story continues to develop, several key questions remain unanswered. Did Labour ministers directly influence the content of the witness statements? Was there coordination between government officials to deliberately undermine the prosecution? How high up the government hierarchy did knowledge of these decisions go? And most importantly, are there other cases where similar political considerations have influenced national security prosecutions? The political ramifications of this scandal will likely continue for months to come. It has given the Conservative opposition a powerful weapon to use against Labour and has raised serious questions about Starmer's leadership on national security issues. For a government that promised to restore integrity to British politics, this case represents a significant early setback. The China spy case scandal reveals the complex challenges modern governments face in balancing competing priorities. But it also suggests that when those priorities conflict, national security should always come first. Whether Labour has learned this lesson remains to be seen, but the political price they're paying for this misjudgment will serve as a reminder to future governments about the importance of keeping politics out of criminal justice. The full truth about what happened in this case may never be known, but the damage to Labour's reputation and Britain's international standing is already clear. This is a scandal that will define the early months of Starmer's premiership and could have lasting implications for how Britain handles future national security threats. Thanks for watching. If you want to see more analysis of British politics and international security developments, be sure to subscribe for more in-depth coverage and breaking news updates on the stories that matter most.